I thought raising my daughter to become a successful woman was the greatest pride of my life, until she received $33 million and threw me out of the very house I had helped build with my own hands. My name is Margaret Thompson, and at 62 years old, I never imagined I'd be telling you this story from a cheap motel room, clutching the only $50,000 I have left to my name. But here I am, because sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. Let me take you back to when everything still made sense. It was a crisp October morning in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I was in my kitchen, our kitchen, making Robert's favorite blueberry pancakes. The same kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals over 40 years, where Jennifer had done her homework at the counter, where we'd celebrated every birthday and holiday as a family. Robert was already at the breakfast table, reading the Wall Street Journal like he had every morning for the past 4 decades. Even at 65, he was still the same determined man I'd fallen in love with when I was just 22. His graying hair was perfectly combed, his suit pressed, ready for another day of running Thompson Real Estate, the empire we'd built from absolutely nothing. "Maggie," he said, looking up from his paper with those warm brown eyes that still made my heart skip. "Remind me, we have dinner with Jennifer tonight. I want to discuss the new property acquisitions with her." I smiled, flipping another pancake. Jennifer, our only child, had graduated from Harvard Business School and was already making a name for herself in commercial real estate. At 35, she was everything we'd hoped she'd become: smart, independent, successful. She had her father's business mind and what I'd always thought was my caring heart. Our home was a testament to everything we'd achieved together. 8 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, sitting on 3 acres of perfectly manicured land in one of Connecticut's most exclusive neighborhoods. But it wasn't the size or the luxury that mattered to me. It was the memories held within these walls. The pencil marks on the door frame tracking Jennifer's height as she grew. The family photos lining the hallway. The garden I'd tended for 25 years, where Robert proposed to me on our 10th wedding anniversary. I taught 3rd grade at Greenwich Elementary for 35 years, watching hundreds of children learn to read and write. Robert always said I had a gift for nurturing, whether it was 8-year-olds struggling with multiplication or the roses in our backyard. "You make everything grow, Maggie," he'd tell me. Plants, children, dreams. Together, we'd started Thompson Real Estate in 1985 with a single small office and a dream. I kept the books while Robert found the properties. We worked 18-hour days, skipped vacations, ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner more times than I can count. But we did it together, building something that would last, something we could pass down to Jennifer. By the time Jennifer graduated college, Thompson Real Estate was worth over $40 million. Robert owned commercial properties across Connecticut and New York. We'd achieved the American dream, but more importantly, we'd done it as a family. That's why I didn't immediately notice when things started to change. It began subtly the way most betrayals do. Jennifer's visits became less frequent. When she did come for Sunday dinners, she seemed distracted, always checking her phone, always having somewhere else to be. She'd ask strange questions about the business, about Robert's health, about future planning. "Dad, have you updated your will recently?" she asked one evening over my pot roast. "I mean, with the business growing so much, you should make sure everything's properly documented." Robert and I exchanged glances. "Sweetheart, that's not really dinner conversation," I said gently. "I'm just being practical, Mom. We need to think about these things." Her tone was sharper than usual, almost impatient. The conversations with lawyers started around the same time. Jennifer would step out to take calls, speaking in hushed tones on the porch. When I asked about it, she'd dismiss my concerns. "Just work stuff, Mom. Nothing for you to worry about." But mothers know. We feel it in our bones when something's wrong with our children. The way Jennifer looked at me started to change. It wasn't the warm, loving gaze of a daughter anymore. It was calculating, measuring, like she was seeing me as something other than her mother. Robert's health began declining that fall. What started as a persistent cough turned into something much worse. The diagnosis hit us like a freight train: stage 4 lung cancer. Suddenly, our comfortable routine shattered into a chaos of doctor's appointments, treatments, and dwindling hope. I became his full-time caregiver, sleeping on a cot next to his hospital bed, learning to administer medications, holding his hand through chemotherapy sessions. It consumed my life completely, but that's what you do for love. That's what 40 years of marriage means. Jennifer's response surprised me. Instead of stepping up to help, she seemed to withdraw even further. She'd visit the hospital, but her conversations were always about business matters, never about how Robert was feeling or what he needed. "Honey, could you spell me for a few hours?" I asked her one exhausting Tuesday. "I haven't been home in 3 days and I need to shower and check the mail." "I have a conference call with investors," she replied, not even looking up from her phone. "Maybe Thursday." Thursday never came. The conference calls and meetings always took priority. I began to realize that my daughter, the child I devoted my life to raising, saw her father's illness primarily as an inconvenience to her schedule. The financial strain was enormous. Even with insurance, Robert's treatments cost thousands every month. I suggested we dip into our savings, but Jennifer had opinions about that too. "Mom, you need to be smart about this," she said during one of her brief hospital visits. "Dad's treatments are expensive and you don't know how long this will go on. You should think about your own future." Her own future. Not our future. Not Robert's future. Hers. The strangest part was how she'd slip away to make phone calls, always finding empty hallways or stepping outside. Once I caught a fragment of conversation through the hospital room door. "When it happens, and make sure everything's in order." When I asked her about it later, she brushed it off. "Just coordinating with Dad's business partners. Someone has to keep things running while he's sick." But Robert wasn't incapacitated. He was weak, yes, but his mind was sharp. He was perfectly capable of making his own business decisions. So why was Jennifer having these secretive conversations? The night everything changed started like any other. Robert had been in the hospital for 6 weeks, and I was exhausted beyond anything I'd ever experienced. I'd lost 15 pounds from stress and barely sleeping. My hair had gone completely gray, and I looked every day of my 62 years. Jennifer arrived around 8 p.m., carrying flowers and wearing an expression I couldn't quite read. "How's Dad tonight?" she asked. "Stable," I replied. "The doctors think he might be able to come home next week." Something flickered across her face. Was it disappointment? Before I could analyze it further, she was suggesting I go home for the night. "Mom, you look terrible. Go sleep in your own bed, I'll stay with Dad." I was too tired to argue. I kissed Robert goodnight, told him I'd be back first thing in the morning, and drove home to our empty house. I should have stayed. I should have trusted the nagging feeling in my gut that something wasn't right, because when I returned the next morning, Robert was gone. The official cause of death was complications from the cancer. It happened peacefully in his sleep, the doctors said. Jennifer was there, holding his hand. She handled all the arrangements with remarkable efficiency. Too remarkable, I thought later. The funeral was beautiful, exactly what Robert would have wanted. The church was packed with business associates, friends, and neighbors. Jennifer gave a eulogy that brought everyone to tears, talking about what a wonderful father and businessman Robert had been. But even in my grief, I noticed things. How quickly Jennifer had made all the arrangements. How she seemed to know exactly what Robert would have wanted without consulting me. How she handled every detail with the precision of someone who'd been planning for this moment. 3 days after we buried my husband of 40 years, Jennifer asked me to meet her at the law office of Mr. Anderson, Robert's attorney. "We need to go over Dad's will," she said. "It's just a formality, but we should get it done." I trusted her. After everything, despite all the strange behavior, I still trusted my daughter. I thought grief was making me paranoid, seeing conspiracy where there was only sorrow. Mr. Anderson's office was exactly what you'd expect from a high-end estate attorney. Mahogany furniture, leather-bound books, the smell of old money and older secrets. Jennifer arrived looking composed and professional in a black suit I'd never seen before. She carried herself differently, like someone who'd already won a game I didn't know we were playing. "Ladies," Mr. Anderson began, adjusting his glasses and opening a thick file. "I'm sorry for your loss. Robert was a good man and a valued client." I nodded, still numb from grief. Jennifer sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. "Robert's will is quite straightforward," the lawyer continued. "As the primary heir, Jennifer, you inherit the business, Thompson Real Estate, valued at approximately $33 million. You also inherit the family home in Greenwich." The words hit me like physical blows. The business Robert and I had built together, the home where we'd raised our daughter, all of it going to Jennifer, none of it to me. "And for Margaret," Mr. Anderson's voice seemed to come from very far away, "Robert has left a sum of $50,000 to help with living expenses." $50,000 out of a $40 million estate for the woman who'd been his partner in everything for 4 decades. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Jennifer, waiting for her to say something, to protest, to demand that this couldn't be right. But she just sat there, calm as still water. "That's what Dad wanted," she said finally. "He always knew who deserved what." The meetings and phone calls suddenly made sense. The secretive conversations, the way she'd been asking about Robert's health and the business. She'd known this was coming. She'd been preparing for it. I signed the papers because I was too shocked to do anything else. My hands shook so badly that my signature was barely legible. Jennifer signed hers with confident, bold strokes. Walking out of that office, I felt like I was sleepwalking through a nightmare. Everything I'd known about my life, my marriage, my daughter, all of it was crumbling around me. But the worst was yet to come. 3 days after the will reading, Jennifer called me. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the house?" Our house. Except it wasn't our house anymore, was it? It was Jennifer's house now. I drove there through a fog of disbelief, still hoping there was some explanation, some mistake that could be fixed. Maybe Jennifer had a plan to share the inheritance. Maybe she'd realized how unfair this all was. Jennifer was waiting in the living room where I'd hosted countless dinner parties, where we'd opened Christmas presents, where Robert had taught Jennifer to play chess. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in months. "Mom, I've been thinking about the situation," she began, and I felt a flicker of hope. "The thing is, this house is really too big for one person, and frankly, it's not practical to have you living here anymore." The hope died. "What do you mean?" I whispered. Jennifer's voice was matter-of-fact, almost businesslike. "I mean, you need to find somewhere else to live. You're 62 years old, Mom. You're not contributing anything anymore. This house needs to be used efficiently, not to take care of old people." The words hit me like slaps. "Jennifer, this is my home. I've lived here for 40 years. "It was your home," she corrected. "Dad made his decision. You have $50,000. That's enough to get you started somewhere else." I stared at this woman who looked like my daughter, but spoke like a stranger. "I raised you in this house. I devoted my entire life to you and your father. And now Dad's gone, and I have to think about the future." Her voice was getting harder, more impatient. "I can't have you here being a burden, expecting me to take care of you." A burden? The word came out as barely a whisper. "Mom, let's be honest. What exactly do you bring to the table now? You're old, you're broke, and frankly, you're useless. Dad understood that. That's why he left things the way he did." The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This was my baby, the child I'd rocked to sleep, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose dreams I'd encouraged. "I need you out by tomorrow," Jennifer continued. "I'm having the locks changed, and I don't want this to get ugly. Jennifer, please." Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now." The words echoed through the house like gunshots. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Jennifer turned and walked toward the kitchen, as if she'd just discussed the weather. I sat there in stunned silence, surrounded by 40 years of memories that apparently meant nothing to her. The photos on the mantel seemed to mock me, images of happy family moments that had all been lies. I went upstairs to pack. 40 years of life reduced to 3 suitcases and some photo albums. I took my wedding ring, some clothes, and the few pieces of jewelry Robert had given me over the years. Everything else. The furniture we'd chosen together, the art we'd collected, the books we'd shared. All of it stayed behind. Jennifer didn't help. She didn't even come upstairs. As I carried my suitcases down, she was in the kitchen making coffee, acting like nothing had happened. "The taxi's here," she called out casually. I stopped at the front door and looked back one last time at the life I was leaving behind. Jennifer appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand. "Mom," she said, and for just a second, I thought she might apologize, might realize what she was doing. Instead, she said, "Don't forget to forward your mail." The taxi ride to the budget motel felt like a funeral procession. I checked into a room that cost $60 a night, a space smaller than my former walk-in closet. The walls were thin, the carpet was stained, and the view was of a parking lot. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried until I had no tears left. For the first week, I did nothing but sleep and stare at the ceiling. I ate crackers from vending machines and drank instant coffee from paper cups. I couldn't understand how my life had fallen apart so completely, so quickly. But in the second week, something shifted. The shock began to wear off, replaced by questions. Lots of questions. Why would Robert, who'd loved me for 40 years, leave me with almost nothing? Why would he give everything to a daughter who'd barely visited him during his illness? It didn't make sense. The Robert I knew would never have been so cruel. I started remembering things. How he'd squeezed my hand that last night in the hospital and whispered, "Maggie, trust what I've arranged." At the time, I thought he was talking about the business. Now I wondered if he meant something else entirely. There were other things, too. How Jennifer had seemed so prepared for everything. How she'd known exactly what to do after Robert's death. How she'd handled the funeral arrangements like she'd been planning them for months. And then there was Mr. Anderson's behavior during the will reading. The way he'd avoided eye contact with me. How quickly he'd rushed through everything. How he'd seemed almost nervous when I'd asked if there were any other provisions. I made a decision. I was going to call Mr. Anderson and ask for a complete copy of Robert's will. I'd been too shocked during the reading to pay attention to details, but now I needed to see everything. The call didn't go as expected. "Mrs. Thompson," Anderson's voice was carefully neutral. "Of course you're entitled to a copy of the will. I'll have my secretary send it to you." But when I asked about meeting to discuss the details, he became evasive. "Everything was handled properly, Mrs. Thompson. The will is quite clear." "I'd like to review it with you," I insisted. "There might be things I don't understand. I'm afraid my schedule is quite full for the next few weeks. But really, there's nothing to review. Your husband's wishes were very specific." Something in his tone bothered me. It was the voice of someone hiding something. I hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. Then I made another call to Patricia Williams, an estate attorney whose ad I'd seen in the Yellow Pages. If Anderson wouldn't explain things to me, maybe someone else could. Ms. Williams agreed to see me that afternoon. Her office was smaller than Anderson's, but her manner was warm and direct. She was about 50, with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd fought plenty of battles for her clients. "Tell me what happened," she said after I'd explained the basic situation. I told her everything, the will reading, Jennifer's behavior, my suspicions about Anderson. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Mrs. Thompson, I have to tell you, what you're describing doesn't sound right. 40 years of marriage, and you inherit $50,000 out of a $40 million estate. That's unusual, to say the least. But the will was legally executed, I said. Anderson read it in front of both of us. That doesn't mean it was the only will, Ms. Williams replied, or the most recent one. Tell me, did your husband ever mention updating his estate planning in the months before he died? I thought about it. He'd been talking about arranging things and making sure I was taken care of, but I assumed he was talking about the business. Mrs. Thompson, I'd like to request a complete copy of your husband's estate file from Anderson's office. Sometimes there are multiple documents, codicils, or amendments that don't get mentioned during the initial reading. Hope flickered in my chest for the first time in weeks. You think there might be something else? I think your husband loved you for 40 years, and I find it hard to believe he'd leave you virtually nothing without a very good reason. Let me do some digging. That night, back in my motel room, I felt something I hadn't felt since Robert's death. Hope. Maybe this nightmare wasn't over. Maybe there were answers waiting to be found. I didn't know it yet, but Ms. Williams was about to discover something that would change everything. Something that would reveal the true depth of my daughter's betrayal and my husband's wisdom. The real story was just beginning. Ms. Williams called me on a Tuesday morning that changed everything. I was sitting in my motel room, drinking instant coffee and watching the morning news when my phone rang. Mrs. Thompson, I need you to come to my office immediately. I found something that you need to see. Her voice carried an urgency that made my heart race. What is it? I can't discuss it over the phone. How quickly can you get here? 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Ms. Williams, watching her spread documents across her desk with the care of someone handling explosives. Margaret, she began, using my first name for the first time. What I'm about to show you is going to be difficult to process. Are you ready? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was ready for anything anymore. There are 2 wills, she said simply. The words hung in the air like smoke. What do you mean, 2 wills? Ms. Williams picked up a thick document bound in blue covers. This is the will that was read to you in Anderson's office. It's dated March 15th of last year. She set it aside and picked up another document, this one bound in red. This is a second will dated April 22nd, 5 weeks after the first one. My hands began to shake. Which one is legally valid? The second one. In estate law, the most recent will supersedes all previous versions. Anderson should have read this one to you. I stared at the red-bound document like it might bite me. What does it say? Ms. Williams opened it carefully. Margaret, according to this will, the legally valid one, you inherit the family home outright. The business assets are split differently too. You receive 60% of Thompson Real Estate, valued at approximately $20 million. Jennifer receives 40%, roughly $13 million. The room seemed to tilt. But that's not what Anderson read. No, it's not. But there's more. Ms. Williams turned to a specific page. There's a clause here that's particularly important. Jennifer only receives her inheritance if she demonstrates genuine love and care for her mother during the period of grief following my death. I felt like I was drowning. And if she doesn't? If she fails to meet that condition, her portion reverts to you, all of it. The cruelty of Jennifer's words echoed in my memory. Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now. Robert had been testing her, and she had failed spectacularly. There's something else, Ms. Williams continued. Your husband made a video. She turned her laptop toward me, and suddenly Robert's face filled the screen. He looked tired but determined, sitting in what I recognized as Anderson's office. The date stamp showed it was recorded just 1 week before he died. Hello, Maggie. His voice was weak but clear. If you're watching this, it means things have happened exactly as I feared they would. Tears streamed down my face as I heard my husband's voice again. "I've been watching Jennifer change over the past year," Robert continued. "She's become cold, calculating. All she talks about is money, inheritance, what she'll get when I'm gone. She barely visits, and when she does, she shows no real concern for you or me, only for the business." He coughed, and I could see how much effort this was costing him. So I devised a test. I had Anderson draw up 2 wills. The first one, the fake one, gives Jennifer everything and leaves you with almost nothing. The second one, the real one, is fair to both of you. But Jennifer only gets her inheritance if she treats you with love and respect after I'm gone. My heart was breaking all over again, but this time with a different kind of pain. "I pray that Jennifer passes this test, Maggie. I pray that she shows you the love and care you deserve. But if she doesn't, if she reveals the greedy, heartless person I fear she's become, then you'll have everything. You've earned it, darling. You've earned every penny with 40 years of love and sacrifice." Robert's image leaned forward slightly. "I love you, Maggie. I've loved you since the day we met. Whatever happens, remember that. And remember that you are stronger than you know." The video ended, leaving the office in silence except for my quiet sobbing. Ms. Williams handed me tissues and waited patiently for me to compose myself. When I could finally speak, I asked, "What about Anderson? Why did he read the wrong will?" "That's where things get interesting," she replied grimly. "I did some digging into Anderson's recent financial records. 3 months ago, he deposited a check for $200,000 into his personal account. The check came from Jennifer's business account. The betrayal was complete. Not only had my daughter plotted against me, she'd bribed my husband's lawyer to help her do it. So what do we do now?" I asked. Ms. Williams smiled for the first time that day. "Now we spring Robert's trap." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Ms. Williams would contact Anderson and inform him that she represented me and had discovered the existence of the second will. She would demand an immediate meeting to discuss the discrepancies in the estate settlement. "He'll panic," she explained. "Once he realizes we know about the bribery and the hidden will, he'll have to choose between facing criminal charges or cooperating with us." "What about Jennifer?" "That's where it gets fun," Ms. Williams said with a grin that reminded me why I'd hired her. "We're going to give her exactly what your husband intended, a chance to face the consequences of her choices." 3 days later, I found myself back in Anderson's office. But this time, I wasn't the confused, grieving widow who'd been manipulated before. This time, I had Ms. Williams beside me and the truth in my hands. Anderson looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past month. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, and his hands shook slightly as he shuffled papers on his desk. "Mr. Anderson," Ms. Williams began formally, "I believe you have something to discuss with my client." He couldn't meet my eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, there have been some irregularities in how your husband's estate was handled." "Irregularities?" I kept my voice steady, though inside I was seething. "Is that what you call fraud?" He flinched. "I never meant for things to go this far. Jennifer," she was very persuasive. She said her father had discussed the arrangement with her, that he wanted the will handled a certain way. "She paid you $200,000, Ms. Williams stated flatly. "That's not persuasion, that's bribery." Anderson's shoulders sagged. I know what I did was wrong. I'm prepared to face the consequences." "The consequences can be minimized," Ms. Williams said, "if you cooperate fully. We need you to call Jennifer and tell her there's been a problem with the estate. Tell her she needs to come in immediately." "What kind of problem?" "Tell her," I said, finding my voice at last, "that someone's been asking questions about the will. Tell her you need to clarify some things before anyone else starts digging." Anderson nodded miserably and picked up his phone. Jennifer arrived within an hour, striding into the office with the confidence of someone who believed she'd already won. She wore an expensive designer suit I'd never seen before, probably bought with money from the business that should have been half mine. "What's this about, Anderson?" she demanded before she even sat down. I thought everything was settled. Then she saw me sitting in the corner with Ms. Williams, and her confidence faltered slightly. Mom, what are you doing here, and who is this? This is Patricia Williams, my attorney, I said calmly. We're here to discuss some problems with your father's estate. Jennifer's eyes narrowed. What problems? Everything was handled according to Dad's wishes. Anderson cleared his throat nervously. Jennifer, I need to ask you something. Did you read your father's will carefully? All of it? Of course I did. Why would you ask that? Ms. Williams leaned forward. Because we have reason to believe you didn't read the real will. The color drained from Jennifer's face. What are you talking about? Anderson pulled out the red-bound document with shaking hands. This is your father's actual will, dated 5 weeks after the one I read to you. It's the legally binding version. Jennifer grabbed the document and began reading frantically. I watched her face change as she processed the words, confusion, then disbelief, then pure panic. This can't be right, she whispered. This says Mom gets most of everything. And there's some clause about... She stopped reading and looked up at Anderson with wild eyes. What is this condition about demonstrating love and care? Your father was testing you, I said quietly. He wanted to see if you would treat me with kindness after he was gone. Jennifer's laugh was harsh and bitter. A test? He set up some elaborate test instead of just giving me what I deserved? What you deserved. The words came out sharper than I intended. Jennifer, I raised you. I sacrificed my career for you. I devoted 40 years of my life to this family. What did you deserve that I didn't? Everything, Jennifer exploded. I earned my success. I worked for it. You just cooked meals and taught little kids. Anyone could have done that. The cruelty in her words was breathtaking, but they also revealed the truth I'd been trying to deny. This wasn't grief or shock-talking. This was who my daughter really was. According to the terms of the will, Ms. Williams interjected calmly, you needed to demonstrate genuine love and care for your mother. Instead, you threw her out of her home and told her to find somewhere else to die. You called her useless. Jennifer's face went white. You recorded me. We didn't need to, I replied. Your actions spoke loud enough. Anderson found his voice again. Jennifer, by the terms of your father's will, your inheritance is forfeit. Everything goes to your mother. The silence in the room was deafening. Jennifer stared at the will as if she could change the words by force of will alone. Then she crumpled. No, she whispered. No, this can't be happening. She looked up at me with desperate eyes. Mom, please, I'm sorry. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking straight. You know, I didn't mean those things. But I did know. That was the problem. Jennifer, I said sadly, grief doesn't turn someone cruel. It reveals who they really are. She fell to her knees beside my chair, grabbing my hands. Please, Mom, I'll do anything. I'll take care of you, I promise. We can live in the house together. I'll be the daughter you wanted. Looking down at her, I felt something break inside my chest. Not my heart. That had been broken already. It was the last connection to the illusion I'd held about who my daughter was. Jennifer, I said gently, if you had shown me even basic human kindness after your father died, you would have inherited $13 million. Instead, you chose cruelty. You chose to see me as worthless. I was wrong, she cried. People make mistakes. Telling me to find somewhere else to die wasn't a mistake, I replied. It was a choice, just like throwing me out of my home was a choice. Ms. Williams began gathering the documents. Mr. Anderson will need you to file the correct will with the probate court immediately. Mrs. Thompson will take possession of all assets that rightfully belong to her. Jennifer remained on her knees, tears streaming down her face. Mom, please, I'm begging you. Don't do this to me. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 62 years. Jennifer, I'm not doing this to you. You did this to yourself. As we left Anderson's office, I could hear Jennifer sobbing behind us. Part of me wanted to turn back to comfort her the way I had when she was a child, but that child was gone. Maybe she never really existed at all. 6 months later, I was back in my home, our home, but it felt different now. Not just because Robert was gone, but because the illusion of family had been stripped away. I'd inherited everything: the house, the business, the bank accounts, all $33 million. Jennifer had been forced to vacate the house within 30 days. She'd moved into a small apartment across town and taken a job at a competing real estate firm. Her new salary was a fraction of what she'd expected to inherit. At first, she called constantly, sometimes apologetic, sometimes angry, always desperate. "You don't understand what you're doing to me," she said during one particularly bitter conversation. "I had plans, I had commitments based on that money." "What about my plans?" I'd replied. "What about my commitment to the life your father and I built together?" The calls eventually stopped, but something unexpected happened in those quiet months. Jennifer began to change, not immediately and not dramatically, but gradually. She started visiting again, not to ask for money, but to help with small tasks around the house. She'd bring groceries, help with the garden, sit and talk about memories of her father. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told me one October afternoon as we raked leaves together, "about grief revealing who we really are." I waited for her to continue. "I think I was already broken before Dad got sick," she said quietly. "I'd become so focused on success, on proving myself, that I forgot what actually mattered." We worked in silence for a while before she spoke again. "I know I can't undo what I did. I know I can't take back those words. But I want you to know that I'm trying to become someone different, someone better." Looking at her then, really looking at her, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: humility, genuine remorse, maybe even the beginning of wisdom. "Jennifer," I said carefully, "your father's will had another provision that I haven't mentioned." She stopped raking and looked at me with cautious hope. "If, after a year of reflection, you could demonstrate real change, genuine growth as a person, I have the discretion to share part of the inheritance with you." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. "I'm not ready to make that decision yet," I continued, "but I am willing to see what the next few months bring." She nodded and went back to raking, but I could see her shoulders straightening slightly. That evening, as I sat in the living room where Robert and I had spent so many happy hours, I thought about the painful journey we'd all been through. Robert's test had been cruel, but it had also been necessary. It had revealed the truth about Jennifer, yes, but it had also created an opportunity for her to find her way back to the person she could be. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, the devoted wife and mother who'd never imagined her family could fall apart so completely. That woman was gone, replaced by someone harder, but also wiser. Someone who understood that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jennifer. "Thank you for giving me a chance to earn your forgiveness. I love you, Mom." I set the phone aside and looked around the room. The photos on the mantel told the story of a family that had been broken and was slowly learning how to heal. Not the same as before, but maybe something stronger. Outside, the Connecticut autumn was painting the trees in shades of gold and crimson. Soon it would be winter, then spring again. Life would continue, with all its pain and possibility. I had learned something valuable from this terrible experience. Sometimes the people we love most have to lose everything before they can find their way back to who they're supposed to be. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is the freedom to face the consequences of their choices. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, those consequences lead them home. Robert had been right about so many things. He'd known that Jennifer needed to be tested. He'd known that I was stronger than I realized. And he'd known that real love, the kind that lasts, requires both forgiveness and accountability. As I got ready for bed that night, I found myself talking to Robert the way I had so many times since he'd been gone. "You would have been proud of her today," I whispered to his photo on my nightstand. "She's finding her way back to us." I didn't know what the future would bring. I didn't know if Jennifer would continue to grow and change, or if we could ever fully repair what had been broken between us. But for the first time in a year, I had hope. And sometimes, hope is enough to build a new beginning on. The next morning, Jennifer called early. "Mom, I was wondering if you'd like company for breakfast. I could bring those blueberry muffins you always liked from the bakery downtown." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. We still had a long way to go. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. But we had something to build on now: honesty, humility, and the possibility of redemption. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Robert's final gift hadn't just been the money or the house. It had been the chance for all of us to discover who we really were when everything else was stripped away. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth more than $33 million.